part of what we're learning in this class is how to figure out what went wrong, right? And that's kind of what a bias is. So a bias in sampling. What could go wrong here in sampling? And so we want to also figure that out because that's what makes you a good consumer in statistics. So the first thing, let's talk about bias. The sample has bias if, all right, so now we're setting the stage for how we know that there is bias. If the results of the sample are not representative of the population. Not representative of the population. Right? So whatever my sample is, because a sample is a piece of it, right? But it does not represent the population, that is considered bias. So there are several types of bias that we're going to be looking at. And the first one, lo and behold, is a sampling bias. So a sampling bias means that the technique used to obtain the sample's individuals tend to favor one part of the population over another. Favor one part of the population over another. Right? So I want to know, I don't know, I keep saying hats. I don't know why that's stuck in my head. It just is, but I want to know how many people like to wear hats. Well, I'm going to watch the baseball team. Well, those guys are wearing hats, right? So then that would be a sampling bias because they're all wearing hats. That doesn't mean that that's representative of everybody, right? So that's a sampling bias. Any convenience sampling. So remember we talked about the different types of sampling. Any convenience sample, yes, it's the easiest one to obtain, but it has sampling bias because you're not getting a general sample here. You're just getting a sample of what's right next to you, right? Or the easiest way to get that. So that's a sampling bias. Another type of bias is non-response bias. This exists when individuals selected to be in a sample who do not respond. Oh, thank you, Captain Obvious. If it's a non-response bias, they do not respond to the survey and have different opinions to those that do. All surveys suffer from non-response bias. All surveys have bias. That doesn't mean we don't use them, but that's part of statistics, is recognizing the downfalls. It's real world type stuff. Everybody uses surveys that we're looking through. Every single survey has bias. All surveys do. So because of that, then we just determine what type of bias it is that we're looking for. All right. So a response bias exists when the answers on a survey do not reflect the true feelings of the respondent. So that's what makes a response bias. If the response that is given does not represent the true feelings of the respondent, right? Or reflect what is happening there. Wow, I'm really tripping over my words. There are different types of response biases, all right, so that we can look at those. One of them is misrepresented answers, all right? So survey responses that misrepresent facts or are just flat out lies. Survey responses that misrepresent facts or are lies, just flat out lies. So an example of what this would be, which is why the response does not reflect the true answer, right, or the true feelings, a survey of college grad salaries. Well, people are going to want it to sound better than what they are. So if you just ask someone, hey, what do you make now that you're out of college? If they really feel like they need to inflate what's going on, could be just a flat out lie. Or they misrepresent, because it couldn't be, well, this is what I'm going to make, not this is what I'm currently making, right? So that's what a misrepresented answer, legit misrepresent, or your pants are on fire because you're a liar. Right? Okay. How about the wording of the questions? This is another type of bias. that you have to pay attention to. And remember, we said every single survey has bias. So you could misrepresent your answers in a survey. You could have a wording of the question that makes an issue. So the way a question is worded can lead to response bias in a survey. So questions must always be asked in a balanced form. Asked in a balanced form. So do you oppose the reduction of estate taxes versus you have to ask these yes or no questions together. Do you favor or oppose the reduction of estate taxes? Because if you just say, do you oppose, you're putting the negative out there. If you put both the positive and the negative, the yes and the no, put both of those options in someone's mind, then they have more of an option and a better chance to respond with both things. If you just put the negative out there, then that is that wording of the questions that creates a bias. All right? Not just the wording, but the order makes an impact. So ordering of questions or words, many surveys will rearrange the order of the questions within a questionnaire so the responses are not affected by prior questions. So you're not thinking about one thing from the prior question and then that's going to affect your next one. So in this type, you would swap back and forth. Do you approve of the job the current president is doing as president? Do you disapprove of the job the current president is doing as president? So you swap back and forth, one to the positive, one to the negative. And then after that, then you're going to ask questions, like a different question, right? So that the first question is not leading into the second, and then the second. So that's something to pay attention to. Now here's the deal with statistics. A lot of times they're set up to lead you in a direction because people want their numbers to represent what it is that they're trying to figure out. So pay attention. That's why we're talking about these bias. How is the question asked? Is it asked in a way that leads you, or does it balance the question, right? Look for those types of bias. That's the goal here. Okay, and then the last one we're going to talk about is the type of question makes an impact. One of the first considerations in designing a question is determining whether the question should be open or closed. It's a D. Open or closed. An open question is, what is the most important problem facing America's youth today? That's an open question. Free response. What do you think it is? Kind of a deal. That's an open question. Or if you do a closed question, what's the most important problem facing Americans' youth today? And then you just give some choices. So that's it. Those are the choices. It's not a free response. If you don't agree with one of these choices, if your answer's not on there, then it doesn't get tallied in. That's the open question, is that. However, let's say on your question, you specifically want to know about these particular things. So then you ask the closed question because you don't want somebody going willy-nilly and then that doesn't affect your results. That's the kind of issues that we're looking at here. And that's what makes a response bias. So the different types of bias that we're looking for here are our sampling bias, our non-response, and then the type of response. And then we've got some choices to go with that. Okay, cool.